you who are here and not out and about, and maybe some of you are tuning in from the bar. We don't know. We don't judge. Good for you for tuning in. I'm Julie Holton. I am the co-director of Startup Grind Lansing along with Ruben Levinson. I'm also the owner of M Connections Marketing Agency and the host of Expert Connections. We're so excited that you are here today. If you are not familiar with Startup Grind Lansing, you're going to want to become familiar with Startup Grind Lansing. We offer a lot of resources, access to incredible people like the panelists that you're going to hear from today. You can learn more at startupgrind.com/Lansing. And we're running a few minutes behind, so I want to just go ahead and get right into today's conversation, talking about building teams, hiring, retention, and recruitment strategies as we're growing our startups and our businesses. So I'm going to kick it over to Ruben. We'll have more announcements from Startup Grind at the end.
Yep, and I'm mic'd up. We're good. Yeah, hello, everyone. And for the state students here, we're proud of you for being here and not in those lines. But those lines don't even look nice today. It looks cold and wet out there. So yeah, we get to talk about building teams, and we've got Chris Grabmiller here, owner of StaffBright, and we've got Angie Pope, who runs Washington Avenue Ventures. We work with early stage companies, and a lot of what we do is helping them get teams going. It's an essential role in getting them investable and getting them launched. And so we'll keep this interactive for those of you here, and anybody online, make sure you chat in questions. Who's going to be able to see those questions? Is that Michelle? She'll be able to see questions that get chatted in, or who's running that? Anybody? No? Okay.
I'll work on it.
Okay. Well, if anybody online's got questions, we'll find them. And then I want to get Chris, I think it'd be great to start with just some of your founder story, like how'd you get into the art and science of finding and keeping talent? Why'd you get into that? What was the reason and when, and how'd you do that?
I can do that. Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Grabmiller, and I am the owner of a few different companies, StaffBright, Labor Rocket, and then also some commercial real estate stuff I've been doing. I'll try to keep it short, but I am a talker, so be prepared.
That's why we brought you.
I like to talk. So I started StaffBright in 2016. We are a recruiting company focused on a lot of IT, engineering, finance, accounting jobs. That company, the story I tell is the greatest sale I've ever had was convincing my wife to let me take every penny we had and put it into a business. And that was a lot of selling and ups and downs, some scary stuff, but overall we've been growing pretty consistently for the past 7 years. I think today is my StaffBright 7-year birthday, I think.
Wow. I
tried to look yesterday in some old emails and stuff. I think it's today. So I turned 7 today, and I actually act 7 in my personal life and in my business age. So I've got that 7-year-old thing going on. But that's what we do. We find candidates for companies generally in Metro Detroit, but we do some stuff out of state, some stuff other parts of Michigan, but probably 75% of what I do is Southeast Michigan recruiting for automotive suppliers. So I'm super tied to automotive, which is great. Honestly, it's great right now. I also do work in Austin. We have a little Austin location, which is a little bit different, very different actually than what we have going on right now in Michigan. Michigan is still booming. I say this all the time, but we read all these things. It's constantly on my phone about layoffs, but we're not laying off in Michigan right now. We're busy. So anyway, that's my super short story. 7 years in recruiting. I love doing it. I love helping clients find great people. It is the most important part of a business is having the right people. You can screw up a lot of stuff, but if you get your people right, it is the cure for all of the screw-ups. So I work really hard at my staff that works for me, making sure I am our worst employee. That's my goal, is to be our worst person. Because all the mistakes I can make, those get fixed if I have the right people on my team. So anyway, that's my short story. I don't know if you want anything else, but...
Yeah, well, maybe even flip it a little bit to the other side. What are you telling people who want to be the right people for those companies, and how do they find the right fit for them?
So for my clients that are looking for people, is that the question?
No, I'm flipping it to the person themselves looking for the right fit at the company. What advice would you give them to get matched with the right companies?
So I'm a big believer in be yourself to candidates that we talk to. I think that if you're looking for a job and if you're yourself and it's not a fit, that's okay. So I always lead with, when you're looking for something as a candidate, be yourself, number one, and if that's not what the company's looking for, then you didn't want to be there. So be yourself, but all the typical stuff are still true, right? Have a good resume, work your network. Interview prep is huge. We spend a lot of time with candidates on preparing for interviews. There's a lot to it. We have many documents that we give candidates before they interview, helping them understand what to do and what not to do. Like, I have gum in right now, probably shouldn't have gum in. Like, probably not what we do in interviews.
You're past the interview stage.
I'm past the interview stage.
I love it when the experts call themselves out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm totally fine with calling myself out.
This is what you shouldn't do, right?
Exactly. But LinkedIn is huge, guys. Like, LinkedIn for a candidate perspective, you learn so much more with the picture, who you connected with. You learn a lot via that. So candidate side, you've got to have a strong LinkedIn profile. Don't be late. Like, interviewing is a lot of like fundamental basic stuff, but I would say what I think is the most important is what I said in the beginning: being yourself as a candidate when looking for a job.
Good. I'm going to jump back to you. Also want to get Angie on here. Angie, you can do a little more introduction and background, but Angie has years ago decided to really get a deeper knowledge in this space and got her master's here at Michigan State in human capital right on this topic, and she's spent a lot of time working with humans, or what do we call you, the one that takes human out of HR sometimes?
Now it's out on the
Now it's in
web,
public.
right? It's out there, yes.
Yeah,
So,
now you might be a liability.
Yeah, I'll have
but
to
can you
explain
give a
it.
little bit more background and why that interested you and why
Sure.
this whole topic is, you're so passionate about this topic and you work with companies on this now?
Sure. So out of college, I went directly into being a financial advisor and wealth management. I spent a lot of my time in that role doing a few things: financial modeling, forecasting, helping people reach their goals. What I noticed when I had worked there after a while, and I had started up a scratch agency, so a new office, and I needed to do some of the recruiting, the training, the development in that space, is that a lot of the skills that I had learned in the financial world helped me, financial modeling helped me look out to what we might be needing from a people perspective. It's just a different type of resources. You needed financial capital, you also needed human capital. So when I exited the wealth management role that I had, I went back to Michigan. I went to Michigan State, got my MBA in HR management. I was really focused on the human capital planning side of that, which was doing a lot of workforce planning. I was using those same skills of modeling money. I was like modeling people. So that was the joke about how I would take the human out of HR or human resources, because I was looking at the needs an organization had based on the actual needs of the human capital. So it wasn't about a specific person and whether it was a good fit. It was about how many and what kind of roles needed to be at an organization. So I had learned how to use the financial resources, and then I learned how to understand and use the human capital resources. And with that, I ended up exiting the corporate role I was in to go back into the startup space. So small business is where I wanted to go, and I went to the smallest level of that, which is a startup, and was able to use those two skills.
Angie and I were talking one day, and she was explaining to me that she wanted to get out of the larger corporate setting and that type of management. And I said, yeah, how about, I got something on the extreme opposite end for you. How about a young founder who just launched their company and has no people yet, but needs people? And she agreed and got started in that, and then have built a whole venture studio around that concept of helping founders get their teams and their processes and their infrastructure going in the venture studio.
$13 billion company to zero.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah.
And Julie and I are co-directors of Startup Grind to bring you these things, but wanted Julie up here also because in marketing, there's a lot of tie into finding, recruiting, and messaging, and how you position your brand to find, attract, and retain good people. Would you talk a little bit about some of your experience with that?
Yeah, and it's something Chris said really, thank you. Something Chris said really stands out, and it's the authenticity of it. That's a lot of what I work on with in coaching and consulting our clients is making sure that the brand that they have created, the culture that exists within the company is accurately being conveyed in the messaging and in the marketing materials for the recruitment, because the only thing worse, I would say, for someone who's looking for a job, the only thing worse than not having that job and going through that full-time role of searching for a job is then finding what they think is the perfect job only to have the expectations not met. Having what they had, what the company had portrayed is not really what's accurately happening inside, the brick and mortar walls, that sort of thing. So, and the reversal, of course, is true as well. So we work with, for example, a lot of marketing roles are actually now turning into marketing and recruitment roles. We've seen that shift started even before the pandemic. And Chris, I think you could speak more to something like that, but we're seeing such a need from our clients to recruit not just humans to fill roles, not just bodies, in the workplace, but the best people to fill those roles. And so what does that look like? And how are you putting that messaging together? And then also activating your employees, that sort of thing. So we do a lot of work on messaging. In fact, had a conversation this week with a startup founder who was recognizing the need to change his messaging because all of their current messaging is focused on investors. And it's a very different type of message when you're now looking at the marketing language that you're going to use, whether it's reaching customers, but in this case, as we're talking about today, recruiting team members.
That makes a lot of sense.
I do have a couple thoughts on that. I totally agree. HR usually had underneath it talent acquisition as one of the arms, right? That was a piece of HR, and it still generally is. But what happened starting in COVID, still continuing now, is talent acquisition is so much time, and it is almost more sales and marketing than it is HR right now. So what we see is HR teams, some of my clients have figured this out, and we're seeing really great recruiting results. The ones that are not treating recruiting this way are falling behind. I have one client with 2 locations, 20 minutes from each other. Same product, same name on the door. One of them has embraced like recruiting is selling and marketing, while the other hasn't, and they are completely different businesses. The people inside, even the look of the plant in the floors are cleaner and nicer at one versus the other. Same company. But one is aggressively marketing and recruiting. The other is waiting on job postings that just does not work anymore. So it's a really interesting point you made. Like marketing, sales are actually functions that need to support recruiting now. Mm-hmm. And someday that might change, but right now it's sales. Recruiting is sales.
If you're checking for us, any questions from anybody in the virtual audience, we'll take those in the chat anytime. I also, Shrisha, I might have to call on you at some point. We have a founder here who's already launched a business, already engaging clients, Tally Jobs, and maybe you could, if you don't mind, Shrisha, because I think there's a couple things you might want. Do you want to add anything? This is what you're doing now. Use this mic really quick and just introduce Tally Jobs and what you're doing. Come on up. You got to be on. Sorry, I didn't tell him I was going to do this. But look, he's got the hoodie on and everything. Come on, good promo for you. Just tell us what Tally Jobs is and why are you doing it. Make sure they can see you in the camera.
You can stand up here.
Right in front of us.
Yeah.
I don't get blocked.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shrisha Madur. I'm a senior here at Michigan State University studying computer science. And me and 2 other co-founders of mine created a website called Tally Jobs. We find the best quality jobs on the internet and source them onto our website. So by quality, we mean every job is well paid, offers good benefits, and generally has few applicants. We've been doing it for the past 5 months. And then I realized a lot of local Lansing companies are still struggling to find talent in the area. And so I started reaching out to them to see if they wanted to make kind of what Chris was saying, more brand awareness on the campus. And so I started reaching out to them to see if they wanted to post jobs for us. And we did. And so far, we've been able to help 2 local companies in Lansing hire talent off our platform, so that's been pretty cool. And just to add to what Chris said about brand awareness, sales, and marketing, one company that comes to mind is TechSmith. TechSmith puts a lot of effort into recruiting, but also spreading brand awareness across campus at Michigan State. If you talk to any engineer, they already know of TechSmith as they're a freshman because they do a lot of projects with students in classes, and they go to every career fair. And so students always see TechSmith everywhere. So when it comes to finding internships or jobs, TechSmith is one of them that gets so many applicants. So I thought that was a great point.
And TallyJobs is mostly focused on the student population, correct?
Yeah. So we have about 2,000 students on our platform across 5 different majors. And so we kind of curate our jobs for those 5 majors.
And you just got back from Austin South by Southwest, got a chance to showcase your business a little bit. Any big wins there?
I got to meet a lot of founders from Michigan and just, get a lot of advice from them. The biggest one I got is, as we're trying to scale and grow, is to not rush it. Actually, I found myself where I was really trying to, scale too fast. And right now, I just want to be in the process of still building my network out, still, introducing myself to different people in the hiring space. So I was trying to start to tap into the community college market. And I felt myself, I was kind of rushing the sales process of things. And it was becoming ineffective. So rather take a step back and kind of take time with it, nurture the relationships that I have and can meet in the future.
Good, I like that. And hopefully that also means you don't have to be rushing out to see investors immediately. Thank you. I wanted to ask you, Chris, with that, they're creating tech for this. What kind of tech or what kind of tools are you using to source talent for your clients?
So I have so much to say. Can you re-ask me that in a second? Because
how does tech?
No, don't re-ask me
now.
Yeah, in a second. I just wanted to shout out, that's awesome. Senior in college, I was not doing that.
Were you in the bar
I was doing
lines?
the opposite. I was in the bar lines. So that's awesome. Great job. Cool product. I just actually wanted to ask, how do you determine what gets on your platform? Is there an algorithm, or do you manually do it?
Yeah, so we have a scraper that goes through different job boards, and then it creates a curated list, and we still manually make sure that each one hits certain criteria that we have.
Manual for now, probably driven later by AI or whatever you're going to put in, right?
That is a really cool product, by the way. It's a good idea. It's a great job. I would also say, I want to give some advice too here. As a founder myself, this is one of the biggest things I've learned is when you're starting up your journey, there's a lot of people that want to give you a lot of advice. And you have to decide which you take and which you don't. And it's very important. You can go your own way. I had advice that was given to me that was to not give away equity in my company in the beginning, right? So I own 67.5%, and everybody's like, don't give away your shares, don't give away your shares. And if I hadn't done that, I would be nowhere. Nobody thought I should do that because people don't want to give away equity, right? But I have partners with me that without it, we would never be where we are. So my advice is get advice from as many good people as you can, but you guys have to make the choice on what you're going to take and what you're not. I'm a go fast person. I actually like the go fast. I like going fast. But make sure you listen to it a lot, but you can still go your own way. It's really important as a founder.
That's good. I was talking to someone just before this. I was talking to Michelle about that, and I tell people when they ask me, how are you able to do so many things? You're involved in wealth management and a venture studio, and we have a venture fund, and we have some interesting coffee at the Blue Owl coffee shops, and the only way I can do this stuff is because I have excellent partners and we share equity.
Yeah.
And some of our best people today that are partners in our companies were recruited 8-9 years ago without even the skill set that you would normally look for, but the right people, the right value alignment, and they've stuck with us, and we've made them partners in our companies. And that's, of course, when we talk about retention, that's a way to tie people in, one way. Now, some people will say what people said to you, don't ever give away equity. I'm on your side of it. I like giving away equity and tying in partners if they're a good fit.
Yeah, I want to keep giving away equity. I want to get more and more people that are owners of my companies. Great people, like I said in the beginning, are the answer to all the problems. Great people are it. So find great people and hire them and keep them.
Yep, question.
I think in a startup, it's so hard to hire people. You've got no resources, no money, no brand, no office probably. You're competing with Jackson National Life, multi-billion-dollar organizations. How in the world do you recruit people people into that startup?
Great question. So I think with startups, they have an advantage in that they are a startup, and being a startup actually sounds cool, right? A lot of people like the idea of startup. So I actually, we work with quite a few clients that I would categorize like startup-ish. They do a lot of equity stuff a lot of times to get people to come there versus other places. So equity is a tool you can use as long as you do it the right way. You don't want to give away equity the wrong way. But I see that as a tool a lot. But honestly, like having a good website, having job descriptions that are good. Job description, I don't like job descriptions. I think they're usually not what the job is. So actually when we get roles from clients to recruit on, we like remake the job description basically, because the job description is usually like more of a marketing fluff tool. But having the right job description, you got to have the website and stuff. But outside of that, I think there's a great pitch you can make as a startup to candidates to come work for you. Long-term vision. People want to be part of something bigger than themselves. People want to be at the beginning a lot of times. But posting jobs is only part of it. Like, I would get a LinkedIn Recruiter license. This goes back to your question. Like, LinkedIn Recruiter is the best recruiting tool there is outside of your network. It's not that expensive. LinkedIn Recruiter, you can then do a search of all the candidates you could possibly want to look for, and then you can directly reach out to them. So instead of waiting for an application to come in, I'm forgetting how much LinkedIn Recruiter costs, but it's not, it's like $500 a month, but it will let you find the person you're looking for, build a list of people, and then message them. So creating a really good message when you message people on LinkedIn is key. And I think it's a better way to do it versus the free version I would pay. The filters are great. Like, you can really, on regular LinkedIn, it's kind of hard to like really find who you're looking for. You can get lucky and stumble into somebody. But LinkedIn Recruiter is the separate product that will help you find the candidates that you're looking for, and then you can directly message them. So like, we call posting like post and pray. Like, you just don't know what you're going to get at a post. Like, we spend a crazy amount of money on job postings. I don't know why. We get very little ROI from them right now because the supply and demand of candidates is whack. So directly messaging people with a good message, and I'm happy to offline help you. Message shouldn't be too long, shouldn't be too short. It's got to be the right amount, but I think you can put together a pretty compelling message to candidates as a startup. Long answer. I talk a lot.
I want to jump that one to Angie too, because it came up a couple times about attracting and then retaining people using equity. And there's pros and cons of using equity. And Angie studies some of the trends in this, and I think as it relates to especially startups and the trends happening with pay for engineers, for salespeople, a lot of startups use equity as a way to attract and retain people. So Angie, if you would comment on some of the things you've been seeing there.
Mm-hmm, sure. And I also wanted to, I can talk about some of the things I've been seeing, but I think one of the things too as a startup, when you're trying to recruit and you're trying to find people in those roles, Chris was talking about once you have the role, think about how do you find the right person. And as I had mentioned before, I was working on a little bit before that where I was helping with the role design and how can you structure roles. And I think that's something to consider too about how to attract the right people is you can look at roles because startups can look at things differently. And a lot of times the startups we've worked with, they have 5 part-time jobs they need to fill. It's not like they don't have a full-time sales role, a full-time customer service, a full-time office admin. They have all of these little pieces of jobs that need to be done. And so one way I think even to think about attracting or designing roles that could attract people that would be interested is having roles that have a lot of variety, I think can appeal to somebody who is interested in working with a startup because you can work broadly across different types of disciplines that you might not have you wouldn't usually have that opportunity. If you went to a corporate office and got a sales role, you are doing sales function. If you work at a startup, you might be doing sales, legal, contract management, all sorts of things. I think that helps too with the recruitment or with the actual design piece to find good people. As well as there is an opportunity that startups have to be very flexible in the types of people they find. Right now, one of the trends that we're seeing is there are a lot of people that love the idea of like being a nomadic worker, or a remote worker, somebody that can work in any place in the world. And startups can do that. There's not like policies in place to prevent it, or things like you could think through, how might I appeal to a nomadic worker? Because if you have a job that could be remote, is there a way to structure a role that allows to tap into this particular market that maybe corporate environments or other organizations have not yet caught up to make it a great place to work? People that are working part-time. I have young children. I need to work between when my kids are at school, and the fact that I can manage that, somebody can tap into my experiences, my background, if they can be a little bit flexible about how and when I work. So I usually would work, during the day, and then I'd hop back on with founders at 10 o'clock at night when my kids are sleeping.
And they're all working still.
And they're working. So I think just maybe rethinking about maybe an underserved market of employees or people that want roles that the other organizations haven't tapped into yet, being creative, and startups are great about that. So I would encourage startups to think about how they might attract a talented, underserved market in the area. In regards to some trends outside of the, I think that nomadic worker, this flexible remote type of situation that is very helpful. One of the other interesting trends right now, I think that startups should be aware of is, and I'm getting my information, by the way, Carta just published a trend report from at the end of 22. And one thing that they found I thought that was really interesting is that there is a reversal in this idea of giving out a lot of equity. So employees and that are interested in working in startups have started to see this downward pressure on the valuation of companies, of startups, and that also valuation tends to be a little fickle. At some point, company might be valued at 1 million, then 10 million, then 8 million, so it's all over the place. And as a result, some employees are a little hesitant to take as much equity as a portion of their salary. So there has been this trend sort of back to the more of the stability on the cash side of things, which may or may not, depending on what side you fall on and how much equity you want to give away of your company and how much cash you have on hand, could be challenging. So I think that's one thing to think about, is that there's sort of a reversal in that trend.
And the nomadic workers, I just wanted to add, my family and I spent the month of January being nomadic family, and we went to Oaxaca, Mexico, and I worked from there. But while we were there, my daughter, she came from California. She's a nomadic worker, very suited for that. She worked from there, and she got into this forum through Facebook or something of nomadic workers in the area. And what she told me is not only are they wanting to be able to work that way from wherever in the world, but they're getting smart, and they're starting to place themselves in places where the US dollar goes much farther. So they're living well off nomadic remote working for US companies in places like Mexico. That's interesting. A lot of arbitrage that people are playing there, and that's becoming a very important part of their life.
I wanted to jump into with kind of a real life practical example. I love what Angie was talking about when defining the roles and the descriptions of who your team members are. One of the things that I have found with my small business, when I first launched, I was given this great advice of creating an org chart. And I'm like, but I'm the only person to put on the org chart. And my coach at the time said, yes, but start there, build out, what do you want your company to look like? What are all of the positions? What are all of the hats that you're wearing? And, put all of those positions down on the org chart. And eventually your name will not be the name filling all of those roles. And so, of course, taking that as a starting point, one of the things that I realized very quickly was when I managed to recruit some incredible talent. Angie was talking about the variety of their roles. And sometimes, as we know, people's lives change, or what they're looking for in their job, their day-to-day assignments, that may change. And so what I found was that at times when it worked for the business, has given me opportunities to redefine what those roles are. I think it's really important for us to recognize when we have strong talent on our team and to make sure that the work they're doing is still filling their cup every day. Now, obviously, you can't, move someone from, a strategic role that they're in to some arbitrary role that you don't actually need. We have to make smart decisions about it. But I've also found that when there's turnover, that also gives me an opportunity to redefine who's filling what roles, what are the needs that the business has, do we already have talent on our team that can step into those positions, whether it's taking on more work or adjusting the work that they're doing. Another example, we had a woman on our team leave for maternity leave, and she took she took about a year, actually. She took a full year, not about a year. She took a full year, and when she returned, she said, I now have 2 young kids at home, and can we redefine, I really want to come back, but can we create this new position for me? Here's what I think, and she knew the ins and outs of our business, and so she said, here's what I'm thinking of, would this work for you? And it, of course, happened that it worked perfectly for what, she knew what the business needed, and we were able to adjust accordingly. And just like Angie said, Erin works very similarly, where, she's checking in when she can, she's working early in the mornings, when the kids are up, she's working, later at night. She has, different time set aside for the company meetings that she needs to attend, but otherwise she's completely flexible. And it doesn't matter to me, because as long as she's fulfilling the tasks that she needs to, fulfill, then it's a win-win situation. So I think also being able to recognize not just the roles that we decide we need for our startups or our businesses, but taking the talent we have and making sure that we're keeping them engaged, while also helping them add to defining what the business needs.
Want to get Chris to comment. Thank you. I want to get Chris commenting a little bit about how things have changed here in the last few years with a pandemic, and a lot of it had to have changed your industry significantly in the way you find and recruit and talk to employers about employment. We'll do that, and then we'll probably kind of wrap this part. We want to still take questions. Any of you that are hiring, looking to hire, think you'll need employees, or you're looking for a job, anyone online that has employees, we want to hear what you're challenged with. And you've got people up here who have dealt with a lot of it. So use the time, the last few minutes before lunch gets here, to throw some questions in, and we'll try to answer those. But share with us what has changed. There's been some drastic changes.
Yeah, COVID changed everything, recruiting-wise, people-wise. It was the weirdest time, but what's strange is that it's, from an employment perspective, kind of the same as it was right after. So we're still in a post-COVID strange world. Remote work, hybrid work. I don't want to say this is 100% correct, but we generally don't work roles for clients that are not hybrid anymore, because almost no candidates want to work only in an office. So that trend is, I never could have imagined it. I love going in the office. My company, oh my God, pre-COVID, there was no virtual work for my business.
And now?
I was like, they're not going to work.
Right.
Now we have 60 people. Every single person can work partially from home, mostly from home. 3 days a week, I think, is what we do generally now, maybe 4.
You think
from home.
Because you don't go in very often?
No, I still go in every day. Just talk
okay.
to myself. I walk around the halls. It's awesome.
Okay.
But that change is huge, and it's very hard as a startup or as any business to go from in-person every day to virtual. How the hell do you know people are doing anything? And so you have to find ways to look at output now and not worry as much about where they are. And it's very hard to do. Output is everything. What are you hired to do, and are you doing that? And if you are, we have to, as employers, not worry so much about where they are. So that was very hard for me to get over. But now I think it's better than ever. Other trends, though, COVID increased all the pay rates for everything, every job, and they're still up. They haven't really increased probably in the last year or so, but basically as soon as the economy picked up after COVID, wages went up for all roles. So I'll tell you, we do a lot of different recruiting. So I'll give you a couple extreme examples. So some of our lower paid roles, we do some recruiting on some lower wage roles as well. And so we had a lot of positions that were in the $13 an hour range. All of those roles are like 19 now. Like, that is crazy increase. That's a crazy amount. Like, I don't know how these auto suppliers are affording this. It's just like, they have not been able to pass these increases on to the OEMs. Like, the tier one auto suppliers are paying this basically themselves. So that's pretty crazy. And then on the higher end stuff, engineering, IT, finance, those all went up pay rate wise, and they're still up. So the wages are all up across the board, and by the way, people can work wherever they want. So imagine that. It's like a perfect storm as a boss. Like, I'm paying my staff more and I see them less. It's super scary, but it works. It can work. It's not perfect, but it can work. So I think, there were so many things that happened in the COVID environment to the recruiting ecosystem. It's hard to name all of them, but I would say those are some of the biggest things, are the wages and then where you work. Those are just, I don't know if they're forever changed or not. It may come back. A lot of employers are now trying to pull people back in. I'm not going to.
Yeah, Dave.
Nate Bedford's got a question along those lines. He wants to hear from you, Chris, on how to determine competitive, attractive compensation for Michigan-based software engineers, given how common remote jobs are now and the nationwide pool available.
We were just talking about this before we started. That's the thing that is one of the scariest things I've seen, is we are seeing in the IT space, software development specifically, we're seeing California companies post jobs in Michigan with California wages. Maybe like a little bit less than California wages. Like, that competition is happening now for software development in Michigan. Those wages are way higher. So it's really a tricky time for that because you're competing on a different scale now. I think in the last month, things have changed again. So I think my understanding of this is like a month ago, but I think things will probably switch back a little bit with this population because there's been so many layoffs in tech. So I think that will probably pull back.
And a lot of the venture-backed or venture-seeking companies that we work with are divided into two major recruiting needs. It's software engineers and it's sales. When you saw all these changes and you see the engineers' salaries up and down, and what about sales side? Are you recruiting in that area too, and has much changed?
Yeah. I love sales. It's fun too.
And sales, they've always been more remote maybe than others.
They have.
So it's not as much of a change.
They have. Sales-wise, there has been less change because sales jobs usually have such a big commission component to it. Really, when you're advertising those jobs as an employer, you're looking at on-target earnings. You're not talking about base as much. If you're doing it right, at least in sales, is you want to focus on, if you meet your goals, what are you going to make? And that number usually is big. So sales isn't up as much, especially base salary-wise, as software engineers. But my advice for software engineers, just to answer that question maybe more completely, is build a good brand, get people to comment on the internet as to how they feel about working for you. Hopefully it's good. But like Glassdoor reviews, these are things that are important. Like, candidates look for these. But like software engineering specifically, you can post the job. You might get candidates, you might not. But it's a LinkedIn recruit again. Usually for a software developer, you're going to go on LinkedIn. You get LinkedIn Recruiter. You got to target those people specifically. You got to send 100 emails. Here's a tip. Like, if I'm recruiting a software developer, I need to build a list of 100. I'll try to get 70 messages out. Of that 70, I'll maybe get like 6, 7, 8 phone calls set up. So it's a numbers game. So if I'm recruiting a software developer, I'm building a big list of people I like. I'm emailing all of them on LinkedIn. And of that, I will get a population that I can have calls with. And that's how I would recruit for that role and most roles. Software, usually I want more than I do other roles because it's a harder one for response rate.
How do you determine the compensation there, to be competitive? How do you think about that?
Talk to me. It's really hard because we have a lot of tools. I have a lot of tools that I buy that tell compensation. So you can buy compensation tools. They're not even expensive. The problem with them, though, is their data is a year old. And this stuff is changing by the month. So it's really, really hard to know exactly what to target. So I would start baseline. I would look into some tools you can buy. Like we use Career Builder. It's a pretty good supply and demand. It's pretty cheap too. Indeed, I think, has a tool that tells you wages. I would also, here's what I would do also. This is a crappy answer, but because the market changes so quickly, I would go on to Indeed actually. I would search the job and I would look at the pay rates of all your competition right now, live jobs, and see what they're at. And Indeed does a good job getting pay rates more than others. Like a lot of others don't do as good, but Indeed does a pretty good job trying to get pay rates on jobs. So I would look at what are the live postings right now, because outside of talking to like a recruiter like me where I have a lot of data on that, like manual data, not purchase data, my manual data is the best. It's less sample size. You know, I have 10, 20 clients in this area that are doing software development. That's still a lot more meaningful than a year-old data. So it's hard. It's not the best answer, but I think a little bit of manual work, a little bit of outside work is probably the right way to go to find out the right pay rate.
And there's one, I wanted to make a comment about another tool that's specific for startups, so Carta Total Rewards. A lot of startups may already be using Carta to manage their cap table, but Carta is for startups specifically, and you can even look, they allow you to break down compensation from a company that has 0 to 10 employees that's valued from $1 to $10 million. So you can really drill down into what stage in valuation and size your organization is. And then it will look at it also gives you information about not only the pay, but then the equity component. So you can sort of run these different scenarios where like, okay, if I am valued at 5 million, I have 8 employees, I need to hire a software developer, and I want to give away less than X percent of my company or this much, in stock, then where might I be able to compensate them? So it gives you a couple of like levers to sort of pull when you're looking at in a startups situation. So I would take a look at that one. And I think there's some other ones specifically for startups.
Teresa.
Yeah, I'm curious if as the next generation of talent is starting to enter the job market, are employers changing some of the recruiting methods that they are? One example is the term of quiet quitting. Are employers like adjusting their, for the future, their recruiting methods now?
Will you repeat the question a little bit?
The question was around quiet quitting, new trends, what we're seeing in
Next
gen recruiting, I guess, ideas and thoughts. By the way, quiet quitting is super real. I had a dude work for me. He had 3 jobs while he worked for me. 3. I was his 3rd. It's crazy. But I'm honestly not seeing that much done right now from my clients to address this stuff. It's just kind of weird. I feel like there's still there's such a scramble to get the right people in the door and figure out how to even acquire it right now. There's a lot of areas that are being missed, even from a talent retention side. Like we have hired some really good people that didn't last in clients. And that sucks because you went through all that effort and then you lose them. So we're still in this, I believe we're still in kind of a mad dash scramble, weird hiring world where like fundamentals, blocking and tackling are kind of like the best I'm seeing right now. And some of the other stuff is just still, I think, falling to the wayside a bit.
I just want to comment as a human and not as a business owner or panelist. I would say everyone should always be watching what the next generation wants. I think that, and I won't get on my soapbox for too long, but it seems like there's a history of every generation complaining about the younger generation right below it, right? Like there's always, forever, for the history of time.
That was us before it was you.
And so I'm going to share a little story about a conversation I once had with my mom. My mom, by the way, retired from Sparrow young. She, made all the right moves in her career, saved a lot, invested right, retired at 54. So just incredible woman. She worked there for almost her entire career. And I'm apparently a geriatric millennial, they call us. So, but I'm a millennial.
That's a great term.
And my mom is the young end of the boomers. And I remember my mom at one point, towards the end of her career, she worked at Sparrow. She was a mid-level manager, and she was kind of complaining to me about some of the millennials on her team, and saying, oh, they want all this time off, or they want, they'll even take like less pay but for more benefits, and I just, not in a position to deal with that. And she's like, I just don't understand. And I said, well, Mom, like, think about how amazing it is to take a vacation and to have that time off, and how refreshed you feel, and like that in and of itself is like payment. So I'm like explaining this whole concept to her of why some people, I think now we want more pay and more benefits, but anyway, at the time I was like explaining this to her. And, and she made the comment, well, I want more time off. I want more flexibility. And I said, but the difference is, we, as I'm speaking for the whole generation of millennials, we're willing to change jobs to get it. And at that point, I had recently changed careers in order to get it. I had worked in TV news for 12 years. I worked 24/7. Enough said, right? And I didn't want to work 24/7 anymore. And in order to get the life I wanted, the time off, the benefits, and eventually the financials to match, I changed careers. And that was something completely unheard of for my mom's generation. Anyway, my point being that I think that each generation teaches us something new. I was able to teach my mom that, hey, yes, if you want better benefits, or if you want more time off, if you want flex time or whatever, then push for it, speak up for it. And I think next gen will be teaching us what you want, what that looks like. And so I think as we're looking at our own businesses, maybe it hasn't caught on yet with business. Businesses should be paying attention to the quiet quitters, right? Like that probably isn't even that new of a concept. I think that the pandemic has just brought out and given a fancy media, terminology to something that's been happening for a long time. Essentially, I was probably a quiet quitter for a year while I was building my business before I took it full time. If you want to really look at, hopefully no one's watching, but because I was I was not like your guy. I was putting in my hours, I was doing the work, but you know what I mean? So it's like we really need to pay attention to these things. And if Gen Z says that there's something that they really care about, then eventually the business world will have to shift to make sure that they care about it. You are the future of business. That's just the way it is. And I think millennials did a lot to reshape, even hybrid working. When I launched my business, we were completely virtual because I didn't want an office. That was kind of the millennial in me, like, I don't want to, be tied down anymore. I wanted, before it was cool to be a nomad, I wanted to at least work at home in my pajamas. Mm-hmm. So I think those things will catch on. And my last point I want to make real quickly is that I think for the startups in the room, this is where, as you're building your company, this is when you need to think about the culture and the brand and what you want to create. What will your workers want? Not just what will you want. Dave and I have conversations a lot about someone named Elon, who has a very distinct style. And, when Elon Musk came in and took over Twitter, there were a lot of people who left or who were fired. I think that in that turnover, there were a lot of people whose style would not have matched the management style of Elon Musk. And now, anyway, so like if you want an Elon Musk management style, or if you want to work 24/7, then go, then set up your startup like that. But if the people you're going to be recruiting are not going to want that kind of work style, if those aren't the kinds of hours they're going to want, or if they're not going to want to be tied to an office location, but that's what those are things that you need to make decisions about. And not that you have to have all of those things perfect from day one. After all, you're building your startup and developing your product, and you've got a lot on your plate. But it's a lot easier to start building a strong culture with a brand that matches that culture than to come in later and try to change. One of the biggest challenges that I see, especially for small businesses in this region, is they are trying to recruit, but they don't have they don't have a workplace culture that matches the brand they're putting out there. And so it's really difficult. You can come up with the best marketing language in the world, all the flowery content to describe why you should come work at company X. But if everyone knows that company X actually has a bad reputation, or they don't treat their workers well, or they're just riddled with problems, then the marketing language isn't going to work. So I think it's something to think about while you're building.
We're going to close it with Chris. Want to make sure that for anybody online watching this now or later that is struggling, and I imagine there are many challenged with finding talent, what does it look like to engage your company, your group? How do they find you? And then how can they follow you for thought capital and resources that you put out in this topic?
Great question. So first off, you don't want to pay me to recruit for you as a startup unless you have to. So I'd be happy to charge anyone to recruit, but I would rather help you guys learn how to do it yourselves. Founders are in the same club. We had to walk through fire, or we're walking through fire now. So I will support you guys and help you guys figure out how to do this on your own. You don't have to pay me. I would happily take your money as well. But you shouldn't, because it's expensive to do what I do, and you should save that money for other things. So I'm happy to help. Anybody online, anybody here, I will give you the tips and the tricks of what I would do if I were you to find good people, and I would avoid paying me to do that because you need to use that money, especially in the beginning for other things. Figure out how to sell your product as quickly as you can. That's another piece of advice I just wanted to add in here, guys. Sales cures all. So having great people and learning how to sell. So one thing I did terribly, honestly, was our marketing, our website, it's still not that good because I was so focused on how to get clients and how to generate revenue. That was it. I left other things on the wayside. So tip for you guys, I waited too long. We're just now redoing all that. It's been 7 years. But tip for you guys, make sure you know how to find the money, right? How to sell, how to give your clients what they're asking for is such an important. I've seen so many companies build a $50,000 website in their first year of business, really good website. I wanted to buy their stuff, but they didn't have any revenue or couldn't generate revenue. So, maybe don't do as extreme as I did, where my website still is very average, but be careful on generating revenue. It's what gives you the opportunity to do everything else down the line. So I don't know what question I was answering anymore.
I want to tell that some of them we still call them a startup, but they've raised $1 million, $2 million of funding, and these founders literally, and Angie and I work closely with one, his company's growing rapidly. He had up to, 10 people or so. He doesn't have the time to do the tips you're giving. He's too busy managing the whole thing now. And may need to delegate. So then what does it look like to hire you?
Yeah, so basically what happens is you tell me what you're looking for. I'm going to ask you a lot of questions on what you need. It's going to be better than probably a job description because we're going to ask very specific questions on what you're looking for. And then basically we charge a one-time fee to find one person. So it's a percentage of their salary, and we go out and we recruit that person for you. And there is a time and a place to buy from us, right? The folks we give you guys should be generating more revenue than the fee to hire. So
how much more revenue? Is there a number for that?
I have no idea, but they should be. Especially in the beginning, you want to like I said, people are the most important thing, and paying me 20 grand for a person is well worth it if they are the ones that help you get to the next step. It's well worth it. But I still recommend being very careful as a startup paying fees to me. You guys only have so much money. Yes.
How realistic do you think it is, if you're a non-tech co-founder, so to be able to recruit a team with only equity,
with only what?
With only equity, with no cash flow, and not a big team, but one big enough to get to the point where you can get funding.
Yeah, recruiting with only equity when you don't have the funding, it's probably a smaller pool of people that you're looking for, and I don't know, and I don't think you actually recruit for that, but
everything is doable. You can find anyone. So the question is, there's a person out there for every role, even one like that. The question is how hard it is to find them. That's where there's a line in which I probably recommend maybe another option. like everyone's out there. I just had this conversation yesterday with a client who wanted a very specific thing at a very specific pay rate. And I said we couldn't do it. Not that the person isn't there, but it would take 2 years to find them, right? So there's a spectrum of it, but for you, that is a challenging one. But there's a person like that out there. You got to find them. I would probably recommend, depending on your timeline, they are there. They're somewhere. They're just hard to find.
Any tips on how to go about that?
Your network is where I would go first. And I think people oftentimes don't realize how big their network is. Friends of friends, like if you look at LinkedIn, first, second, third degree connections, there are lots of people, thousands that are within your 3 degrees. And so honestly, like word of mouth networking in your network is a really good way to find people. And I bet you'd be surprised who you can find in that network. But you got to push it a little harder than normal.
I was going to say, from our experience, you're going to have to be a pretty good salesperson. I mean, you got to be authentic, but you're going to have to sell and maybe post about what that equity will be worth and why you're excited about what you're building. And I'm looking for someone to join me. Somebody's got to get as excited as you to take all equity.
That's kind of, I mean, like, yeah, it's like your dream, so that's why you're
Right.
doing it, right?
Yeah,
You get someone else to
that's
do
why
it.
that's not an easy thing to do.
What do you do? What's the business?
It's called TRS. It's a digital health app to reduce recidivism.
Oh, it sounds like a great company. That's a good purpose. There's
So
your first
find
step.
somebody in that's passionate about that, right? That wants to kind of co-found an equity. Dave, do we have anybody else online? Okay. Any other questions here? We've got some food here to get going. The only thing that our online audience does miss out on is some good food and networking. All right. Well, thank you, Chris, Julie, Angie. Thank you. We'll wrap this up and we'll get this out to anyone that wants to rewatch or get some tips here.
Yeah, we can put like a link to my website or email or
We
something.
will.
So people online, if they want to ask me questions,
Yeah.
I'm happy to help.
I thought you said you were going to give out your cell phone number and they could text you 24/7.
I don't care.
No,
I don't know how many
I'm
people are on there, but I don't care.
Don't give it. You'll get 24/7 texts about employee. Yeah, well, I'll be texting you about employee problems. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.